The highlights of the week that was. Welcome to Sunday Square Off. A small army of volunteers shocked the political world last week. They turned in 111,000 signatures to force a statewide vote on Arizona's controversial school voucher expansion. That is 50% more signatures than required to get on the ballot. The signatures were collected in just 3 months in the summer heat. The school voucher expansion is now on hold. It would give all Arizona students the option of using taxpayer dollars to pay for tuition at private or religious schools. But now it's getting a little messy. Over the next 8 weeks, the signatures must be validated by the Secretary of State and county recorder's offices before this can go on the November 2018 ballot. Secretary of State Michelle Reagan tweeted this video of the confusing scene at her office as partisan observers hovered over employees verifying signatures and petitions. Most voters have never witnessed a scene like that, and I don't think our guest has either. Joe Kanefield, a former Arizona elections director and in-house attorney for the Secretary of State's office, former in-house attorney, now political and elections law attorney at Ballard Spahr here in Phoenix. Welcome to Square Off.
Thanks, Bram.
So, have you ever seen a scene like that as signatures are being verified, validated at the Secretary of State's office?
Well, I actually have. We only have one petition at the Secretary of State's office now, but in the past, when there's an initiative, we've seen upwards of 8 or 9 of them, and each one 100, 200,000 signatures, and you need 8 to 10 people to process those petitions. So you can imagine a room with, multiply that times 5 or 6, and so we've seen a lot of people processing.
So is that 8 or 9 petitions at a time, or just one at a time? Because they were just looking at one batch of petitions here.
Yes, well, what I was talking about was citizen initiatives in the summer of an election year, where we may see, a dozen, or not, maybe not quite a dozen, but we see quite a few, and there's a lot of people. This is just one. Obviously, there's a lot of interest, a lot of people in the room.
Yeah, so there are about a dozen, maybe 14 people in that room on both sides for this one petition. How concerned would you be as an elections official that that has the potential to intimidate or at least affect the work of the Secretary of State's employees?
Well, I would be concerned. I think the most important part about that process is that the election workers be able to do their jobs unobstructed, uninhibited. They've got a lot of petitions they've got to process. What you were seeing there was they were taking the petitions and separating them from the text that was attached to those petitions. But a lot of people in the room, there was obviously a chance that something could go wrong. I understand nothing did go wrong. It just looked a little chaotic. I think it actually went pretty smoothly from what I can gather.
And social media didn't help because you had some groups, supporters of the expansion, putting out the call for volunteers to come verify signatures. They don't verify signatures, correct? Outside groups do not verify signatures.
They're not verifying signatures. They're obviously looking at the petitions in case there may be a challenge later. The verification process itself is going to be done by the Secretary of State's office and then ultimately the county recorders once they take a sample of those signatures and send them to the county recorders for that verification.
Okay, so make us smarter on that. Drill down, what is that whole process like from the Secretary, when the Secretary of State gets the signatures, the petitions, to the time the county recorders look at them, to the time it goes on the ballot or not?
So the first process, as you saw in the video, is they are going through, they're separating the petitions, or they have separated them from the text. They are sorting them by county. They are removing any petitions that weren't properly signed by the circulator, don't have the proper boxes filled out on the front, or don't have the serial number printed on the petitions. Then once they do that, they number them and scan them, so they're available for everyone to see. Anyone who wants to do a public records request can ask to see them now online.
And that's what the other outside groups are doing. They're looking at their own copies of the petition.
Correct. So, but once they scan them, then in the old days, we used to actually have to go back through the paper copies again and again to look for the problems. That's now all done online. So the Secretary of State's workers are looking at images of these petitions online. They're looking for those issues I mentioned.
Lots of little things where you can go wrong.
Right, and if they see a petition, for example, that wasn't properly notarized by the circulator, which is a requirement, or didn't have the box checked on the front that said they were paid or volunteer, well, that spoils the entire petition. That's removed. And then once that process is complete, the Secretary will then run a computer program to generate a 5% random sample of all the signatures, and then sort those samples by county, send copies of those petitions to the county recorders. The county recorders will then look at each one of those sampled signatures to see if the person was a properly registered voter and able to sign. They then add up that number, send it back to the secretary. They've got 15 days to do that, and the secretary has 72 hours then to do the math to see if it projects out to 100% of the 75,000 plus signatures that are required.
So I hope you got all that. It's a long, involved process. Should take about 8 weeks. Last question. They delivered 111,000 signatures, 50% more than needed. Typically, is that enough, given that many signatures are thrown out? Is that typically enough to make it on the ballot?
That's typically going to be enough. You know, the error rate hovers around 25% on average. It varies from petition drive to petition drive, but this was the only drive that was out there circulating. I understand there was a lot of volunteers. They probably did a lot of scrubbing before they filed. So it wouldn't surprise me if this one qualified, but anything's possible, and I'm sure that we're likely to see some challenges.
There should be some legal challenges. All right, Joe Kanefield, great insight. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Brad.